we are pleased to have Professor Nicholas Bloom and his co-author Robin Han to talk about their paper, how hybrid working from home works out. Nicholas Bloom is a professor in the Department of Economics at Stanford and a courtesy professor at Stanford Business School. He's also chair of the Productivity Innovation and Entrepreneurship Program at the National Bureau of Economic Research and a fellow of the Center for Economic Performance and the Stanford Institute for Economic Policy Research. Professor Bloom received many prestigious fellowships and prizes. He's a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Science and a recipient of Guggenheim and Sloan Fellowships, the Burnister Prize, and a Frisch Medal and a National Science Foundation Korea Award. Currently, he serves as an associate editor of the Division of Economics. His research focuses on working from home, management practices, and uncertainty. And many of his papers have been published in top journals. Another speaker, Robin Han, is a PhD student of economics at Stanford and used to be a dissertation fellow at Luohan Academy. Today's seminar will last for an hour, and we're going to have the question in the middle of the presentation. So if you have a question, you feel free to interrupt. And in the chat box, the Professor Bloom just shared his executive head talk about the working from home. So feel free to click the link to see his another talk.
Thanks very much. I see Eric. Hey, Eric. We're just down the road from each other. Eric, my co-author. Great to have you here.
Yeah, good to see you from a few feet away.
Yes. Eric and I have multiple overlapping papers and projects. So it's but exactly. He's like, if I got a baseball and threw it really, really hard, I could probably just about break Eric's window, but I won't do that, Eric. Don't worry.
Or more likely, jog by my house as you do in the mornings. Yeah.
Okay. Great. So why don't I start? And as always, by the way, I know it's really hard on Zoom to interrupt me. Feel free just to start speaking. If I hear any voices, I'll stop. I'll try and pause. But unlike in a seminar where you can see people's hands, if you want to put the hand up, but Robin, if you see somebody's hand up, feel free just to interrupt me because I don't mean to kind of talk over questions. So I'll do this. So this is a paper with Robin Han, who's a PhD student who you know at Stanford, and James Liang, who I'm sure everyone knows was a former student at Stanford, but is better known, I think, for being the co-founder, the CEO, and right now the chairman of Trip.com. So just to put some numbers on it, working from home in the US has increased dramatically. So this is the data we've been collecting. We've been surveying about 5,000 Americans a month. The pre-pandemic data is not ours. It's from US National Statistics. So before the pandemic in the US, I'm not talking about China, in the US, but these numbers are very representative of much of Northern Europe, Australia, New Zealand. Basically, nobody worked from home. And then during the pandemic and the worst period of the pandemic, which for us was kind of April, May, June 2020, everyone that could work from home did. And then it slowly dropped back down. It now looks like in the US, working from home is leveling out at about 30% of full paid days. So this is the percentage of full days. The reason I use that measure is a lot of people work from home 2 days a week. You call them working from home or not, we're going to measure it in terms of the percentage of days. So roughly a third of all days in America now work from home, roughly 2/3 people come into work. To give it in a bigger perspective, here is data from the US on working from home as we can assemble it going back to 1965. You can see that working from home has been growing over the last 40 years. The big driver of this is stuff that certainly Eric's done a lot of work on, is better technology. So my parents, I'm one of 4 children, and my parents both worked, and they worked from home when I was a kid so they could help look after me and my brothers and sisters. And they said it was horrible. When they did it back in the 80s and 70s, it was pieces of paper, there were no computers, it was really, really bad. If you go back to the 60s, it was, terrible. As time has gone on, computers have got better. By the time I first started working from home in the early 2000s, you'd use telephone calls and you could sometimes email files. It wasn't great. In around 2010, 2015, cloud comes around. We have Zoom, Teams, etc. So you can see there's been an increase as technology's improved, but it's also clear there's just a one-off change. So as an economist, I don't know what others think. I've never seen anything really like this. It's like a one-off shift in something that's just permanently a new equilibrium. There's an equilibrium of about 5, 6, 7% of people working from home, And then we just banged up to a different equilibrium in the US and Northern Europe of something like 20 to 30%. And I think it's going to stay there. So this paper is going to kind of examine why it's stuck at a higher level, but it's striking. You just don't, normally in economics, you see gradual adjustments. This is just a bang from one equilibrium to another.
Hi, Eric.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Does anyone have a question?
Sorry. Hi, Nick.
Yeah.
Can I ask one question regarding this, the two new equilibrium you are talking about? So in this graph, it seems that after the pandemic, it's on a decreasing trend as well. So maybe in the long term, it's gonna take some time to get back to the previous equilibrium.
It's a great question. So I actually have a slightly different view. You're right here. It looks, so if I go back, this is the data. You can see at this point, it's really asymptoting out. So okay. There's a bunch of data now for North America, like office return rates and transport use that looks like it's kind of flatlining. So I would say, if you just looked at this from this year, there's really no trend. You're right. Here, it's slightly harder to see it because the thing's bouncing up and down. I actually think what's going to happen is this thing's going to go down to about here, and then it's going to start going up again, but at a steeper slope. The reason is what's called directed technical change. So the number of people working from home has gone up about sixfold now versus 2019. And when you talk to hardware and software firms, they're all rapidly developing new products to service that market. So the technological progress around stuff to allow us to work from home is far better. So to give you a story, my computer crashed about a month ago, and I opened up my old computer that I'd last used in April 2020, and it opened up on Zoom. And the Zoom was like terrible. It was really old fashioned. It looked really bad. And I realized how much better Zoom is now than it was 2 years ago. And so what's happened as an economist is the market size for work from home technology has got like 5 or 6x bigger. And so the rate of technological progress in work from home has gone up a lot. And so I think if you plotted this thing out, it's going to settle down to about here, and then it's going to start accelerating back up again. So if you think about it, in 10 years' time, we're going to have holograms and virtual reality. It's not clear what the technology would be. And I know Eric's worked a lot on this. Forecasting technology types is really hard, but trends you can do much better. I think the technology is going to get far, far better to support work from home. So I don't think it's ever asymptoting back. And I think, interestingly enough, my prediction is the growth rate is going to actually flatten and start to pick up again. But that's a forecast. I'm happy to discuss that. I don't have any data beyond. The only piece of data I have on that was you scraped the US Patent and Trademark Office and looked at the new patents coming out and the share of them that mention work from home and remote technologies. And that was about 0.5% before the pandemic, and it's now up to 1.5%. So if you look at patents, they're like flat around work from home, and then they suddenly start going up and up and up after the pandemic.
Yeah, and also another point is that if you look at China right now, because China have a very good kind of pandemic control, so we do not really have this work from home for basically a majority of people. So in that sense, the working from home for China will be driven by the technology change in the long term, right?
But it's funny. It's amazing to hear that. So in the US is the opposite end, but the same outcome. Basically, we're post-pandemic. So, I just went to my kids' parents' evening, and everyone's vaccinated, no one wearing a mask. Basically, everyone I know is both vaccinated and had multiple versions of COVID. Like, Eric, have you had COVID? Yeah, I've had it once or twice.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I had it probably twice. It's like, once you're vaccinated, I actually didn't know. I didn't know I had COVID until I had to get a test to get on a flight and discovered I had it. If you've had multiple vaccinations and it's Omicron, it's so mild. So America's in the same post-pandemic situation. When you talk to companies now, they mostly say the pandemic's behind us. It's like the flu or the cold, it's circulating, but it's not really affecting behavior much anymore. So what's driving this in the US is economics and technology. And it sounds like it's the same in China, but I don't want to discuss too much about the pandemic. They got very different strategies, but either way, for both countries, the pandemic is kind of like a thing China's a slightly different situation, but for the US, it's basically in the back window. And the same as in Europe. If you travel in Europe, no one's really wearing a mask. Everyone's had COVID once or twice, and it's kind of like the cold. Everyone's had multiple colds in their life, and they're not that bothered about it. But yeah, I think I sent around those executive education slides because someone earlier today, I was doing an exec ed in Stanford GSB, said, should we be doing this? Because I asked some question about for the environment or social. I was like, no, you should have hybrid work from home to maximize profits. It's good for companies. It's all about making more money. I mean, as an economist, companies should do things that makes them more money. And I think allowing people to work from home, you'll see from trip.com, just improves profitability. So this isn't a social good thing. This is purely an economics thing. Jasmine.
Yeah, I have a quick clarification question. So the two figures you're showing right now is just limited to information workers or knowledge workers. So like, for example, are we also talking about essential workers like truck drivers, doctors, nurses, like this kind of people? Or it's just the general public?
Great question. I think, yeah, this is the next slide. So you're exactly right. So the two figures I showed you for the entire economy. So where does it come from? Where does this 30% roughly come from? So it comes from, this is in the US, 55% of Americans cannot work from home. So they're truck drivers, essential service. They're typically low pay. Think of retail, manufacturing. Go to, Kentucky Fried Chicken, McDonald's. These people have to work, hospitals all the time. So that's over half of Americans. Then the other group are much more interesting. There's then these folks here, which is pretty much everyone, to be honest, that's my friends and my university graduates, managers, professionals, anyone that probably Eric and I interact with, people have MBAs, they're all here pretty much. They're hybrid. So if you go to any big company, most of the managers are hybrid employees. They're in work 2-3 days a week. They're at home 2-3 days a week. And then there's a group down here that are fully remote. Most people think the fully remote employees are like tech. They have this idea they're all Airbnb and Yelp. But if you look at this is 15% of the labor force. And there are 180 million or 170 million working Americans. So there's about 30 million people here. So 1 million at most is tech. Mostly these are IT support, HR, payroll. They're kind of mid-paid. So you have the lowest paid people are in the office all the time. The middle paid tend to be actually quite often fully remote, and the highest paid people are mostly hybrid. So you're right. And this is 15% of days, plus these people are about half time. So this is roughly another 15%. So that's 30% of days from these two groups. And that's what gets you 30%. So this experiment is only talking about this middle block. This middle block is just the hardest to deal with. So I was listening to a podcast today from the New York Times. They're talking about why everyone talks about hybrid, because it's so hard to manage. This is easy to manage. You tell everyone to work remotely, and this is easy. You tell everyone to come onto the office, come to work every day. This is the hard one. So this is why we decided to test this. So there's a big range of views. You probably saw Elon Musk was very negative. David Solomon's very negative. Other people love it. There's masses of newspaper articles, including The Economist. The Economist magazine, in the space of a few months, had one piece saying it's fantastic and a month later saying it's terrible. Like no one seems to be able to make up their mind. So we ran a randomized control trial. We took 1,600 engineers, marketing and finance folks in trip.com, and we randomized them by even or odd birthdays. We followed them for 6 months, and then the experiment ended, and the results were so positive, the firm basically, Trip, rolled it out to the whole company. What were the results? There were kind of 4 key results. So the first was the thing they cared about the most, was the most positive finding, was employees were massively happier getting to work from home. So Trip said you can work from home on Wednesday and Friday if you're in the treatment group. So they randomized by even and odd birthdays. So people that had an odd birthday were told they could work from home on Wednesday and Friday, and people in the even birthday had to come in 5 days a week. Folks in the treatment, the work from home group, had a 35% reduction in quit rates, which is huge, and had massively higher, significantly, I'll show you in a bit, significantly higher job satisfaction, work-life balance scores. So employees are a lot happier. Result 2 and 3 are less obviously good, bad. They're kind of interesting. So on 2, we see also people shift their time around. So what's happening is folks that are working from home on Wednesday and Friday do a bit less work on Wednesday, Friday, and appear to do more work on other days and on the weekends. When you interview them, they say, look, I'm at home on Wednesday and Friday. These are great days to go to the dentist, pick my kids up from school, go play golf, go for a run, go shopping, and I'll make up for the time on other days or on the weekends. And so this highlights that work from home is also giving people more time flexibility, and people really value the home days to say, go to the doctor. If you want to go to the doctor, it's really hard to do it on the weekend. If you're at home on a Wednesday, it's a great day to do it. And that's what we see in the data. Thirdly, they change how they work. Again, it's not good or bad, but they just send more messages, have more video calls. and presumably have less face-to-face interactions. Oddly enough, they do that even when you're in the office. So if, Robin or Eric are randomized into working from home, even when they're back in the office on their office days, they're still sending more messages, quite a lot more messages. And it's not obvious why. We can discuss it when you come to it, but it seems like it permanently changes people's behavior. And then finally, they appear to be slightly better on performance metrics. We have 4 measures of performance. So you have promotion scores, evaluations, and performance reviews. There's no significant effect. For the coders, we have lines of code written, and that goes up by about 8%. And we also have self-assessed survey data, and that's positive. I would say if you summarize it, there's a small positive impact on productivity. And the main reason is working from home is 2 benefits. One is it's quieter, and people doing quiet work like coding find it's easier to work. And the other is you save about an hour a day on commuting, and roughly half of that people spend on work, and roughly half of that they spend on leisure. So they're basically working a bit more. So I'll stop, and then happy to take any questions. If not, I'll explain the experimental design, who took it up, and then we'll go through the 4 results. Okay.
A quick question here about the experiments. So I know you're doing the RCT, but do you think that will introduce other factors? For example, in the same company, I am in the same team with my colleague. If my colleague is instructed to fully work fully remote, but I need to go to office every day at weekdays, would that change the relationship between colleagues, and would that be another factor that would affect that the behavior just reported, for example, the messages people send during their work days, or the results that you had in the previous slides?
Yeah, so there's a few great points in one there. So one thing you should always worry about in these randomized control trials, it's not that the treatment guys do better, it's that the control guys do worse. So it could be that the treatment people stay the same, but we just destroyed work of the control people. Now, it's kind of hard to be certain. We have other divisions in the firm, and versus other divisions in the firm, the control looks similar. The other thing is teams vary by how many people are randomly sent home to work in those teams. And you find that teams where lots of people work from home on Wednesday, Friday, didn't see any better or worse performance across teams for the rest of people. So it doesn't look like there's major spillover effects. I think the reason is, to be clear, and I'll show you in Take Up, they're randomized into being allowed to work from home on Wednesday and Friday. They, on average, only work from home 55% of those 2 days. So in this experiment, in practice, they're working from home 1 day a week. So what you're really comparing is 5 days a week in the office versus 4 in the office and 1 at home. And I think that 1 at home is enough to keep people happy. They really like it. I mean, everyone would like it to have 1 day a week at home, particularly if you could choose whether it's a Wednesday or Friday or both. But it probably doesn't affect social interactions. It doesn't seem to affect anything else that much. So I think it's certainly true. There is a more radical, like Airbnb in the US has announced people are going to be fully remote. That is pretty radical and I have major impacts. And this isn't what I'm going to talk about today, but for sure, that's really different. This is what I would call pretty mild hybrid. So I don't know if Alibaba is thinking about this, but if it was 1 or 2 days a week working from home, this is seen as in the US as kind of, to be honest, pretty mean hybrid. It's like most people are expecting more. Here in practice, they're taking 1. I mean, that's pretty minimal. It's like they're basically mostly working from home on Friday, if you can think about it this much. So Eric,
So there are different reasons why you might want to have someone come into the office. I think Elon might have pointed to 2. One is sometimes your other workers depend on you a lot. Obviously, if you're on an assembly line, it's pretty important if the guy next to you is handing you the next piece. Or even if you're an engineer working with the guys on the assembly line, maybe it's important for you to have some face-to-face interactions and be able to understand exactly what's going on. So did you have any metrics of how interdependent in a physical way or a proximity way some of the different jobs, I know you had different kinds of jobs that people were doing, and was there any sense that some of them were more dependent on being nearby? And I'll just ask the second question, which is related, is another reason why you might want to be there is if it's hard to measure performance correctly, If you have a objective output metric, you say, okay, you have to, code up this item, and it doesn't matter if you do it at home at midnight or you do it here. Other things, maybe it's important that you're there face-to-face interacting with customers, and there's not a direct way of measuring how you're doing that. Do you have any metrics of how the jobs vary on those? And do either of those, if so, do any of those metrics tell you when working at home works better or less well?
So I totally agree that these things are hugely important for whether you work from home. I should go. So we looked at the impact on performance and promotions in detail, so that they have a very rigorous performance appraisal system. Probably so to Alibaba. I'm sure academics have tenure review, which is like incredibly rigorous, but only normally happens once. But these, like when I was at McKinsey, there'd be thoroughly assessed every 6 months. Trip.com have that, and we took that. And we took promotion outcomes as 2 of our best performance measures. So Eric, for those, we kind of thought, overall, we didn't say anything. We're expecting to find some kind of heterogeneity. We couldn't find anything that robust. Now, maybe, again, we're looking at very mild levels of work from home. You're totally right, by the way, on the performance measure. There's a great anecdote from Marissa Mayer when I interviewed her about Yahoo. She said the reason she canceled working from home at Yahoo in 2013 is she couldn't measure performance. When she put it in place, she relaxed it. I've taken up. We should go. I'll come back. I mean, I should think more about that with Robin afterwards. We didn't find that much effect on performance overall. It's a kind of mild positive. The one group you do see it for are coders. It's maybe they are easier to measure. The only reason I even know about that is we had Robin and I had breakfast with James, and we were showing him our results, and he was saying, "Oh well, the firm is very positive because the lines of code written have gone up." We're like, oh, we didn't know that even existed. He said, oh yeah, it's a very important internal metric. So we got that data from them, but kind of implicitly in your question, half of our people write code and the other half basically do other stuff. The half that write code see a positive effect. So it could be, these are the people that are best measured. These are the people that their performance improves. The others, like in marketing or finance, is harder to measure. But yeah, I'm completely on agreement with the sentiment. It may be that we don't have the perfect group to measure the heterogeneity across them, but yes, you hear this from firms all the time that measurability is pretty critical with allowing people to work from home. So what about the experimental design? So for those who haven't been there, I haven't been to the new office. I've been to when it was called C-Trip, but I haven't been able to, no one can travel to China right now. So it's now called Trip.com. They changed their name. It's basically the same firm. They have a huge, beautiful, apparently, but I've not been there, headquarters in Shanghai. This all ran in 2021, which I mean, everyone in China is aware of this, but in the West, people are kind of astounded no one's wearing masks. They basically had no COVID. There was just no COVID, more or less, in China in 2021 in Shanghai. And so people were not in masks. They were just acting like normal. Kind of looks like for us, post-pandemic or pre-pandemic. They're one of the biggest 3 travel companies in the world, quoted on NASDAQ, 35,000 people. I mentioned here before the pandemic, in 2021, when the experiment was running, there's very little COVID. Here is cases per million people. Here's the US, it's going up and down. Here's China, which up until 2022 is basically effectively 0. So for the period of the experiment, this is effectively in person 5 days a week, not in mask, no social distancing, versus working from home 1 or 2 days a week, again, not in mask, no social distancing. So this is not a COVID phenomenon. Again, it's different now, I'm aware of that, but in 2021, this was effectively no COVID. So James decided to test the Apple hybrid work from home plan. It's a very simple plan. You come into the office Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, you work from home Wednesday, Friday. In fact, you don't have to, you're given the option to. I'll show you in a minute, people work about half the time at home and half the time decide to come in. The way the firm set it up is they took 1,612 employees in 2 divisions, airfare and IT, and they asked them if they wanted to work from home on Wednesday and Friday. They sent this email that was in Chinese, we've translated it, saying, work from home trials invite your participation. They sent it out 3 times, once, and then 2 reminder emails. It's pretty detailed. It's pretty, how long will it last? I mean, it's very factual. Given that C-Trip ran an RCT in 2010, I assume people took it seriously. You have to hope they read their email. It'd be kind of weird. I mean, you think people are talking about this over lunch. It's a big thing. Despite that, only 518 people volunteered. Now, one reason is many people don't want to work from home. The other more likely reason when you talk to the firm is there's a big stigma problem. So the concern was that if anyone volunteers, they're seen as lazy. And so basically a lot of people didn't volunteer because they're worried about being labeled as lazy. So James Liang saw this and said, that's terrible. So firstly, this group was volunteered. They were randomized. They drew a ping pong ball. It said odd. So people with an odd birthday got to work from home Wednesdays and Fridays from the 9th of August onwards. People with an even birthday, like the 2nd, 4th, 6th, 8th of the month, got to stay in the office. So that's straightforward. James saw this and said, that's terrible. Why is no one else volunteering? And he said, right, the rest of them are going to be added to the experiment as well. So everyone else, the non-volunteers, was also thrown into the experiment. To be clear, you're not forced to work from home. So these people could have just not come in. So this hybrid scheme is optional, but both these groups signed a contract allowing them to work from home on Wednesday and Friday. So what they did is have what's called volunteers. I would call them more enthusiastic, and non-volunteers that are either less enthusiastic or worried about signaling. And we're going to see these two groups. They behave mostly the same, but there's some differences. So this is the way it worked out. It started, one group went in early August, one went in early September. So this is what they're comparing. Here's office, here's home, here's photos from 4 people's work from home setups. Nothing particularly remarkable. Have a desk and a chair. It's not their bedrooms, kitchen, living room kind of thing. Notice in the office, they're normally in desks of 4 or 6 people. They're working closely together. So they're not in little cubicles. They're at an open plan offices. The Trip.com building is nice and modern, and these are kind of modern style offices. So here's what it looks like. Teams sit together. So you can understand that if you're coming in, you're typically sat with your team. Here are quads of 6, 6, 6, etc. If you're at home, you're in your home living room. So one question is, what do people look like? This is volunteers and non-volunteers. You notice overall, about 2/3 are male. The average age is early 30s. They basically all have a university degree. About 1/3 have a grad degree. So this is a very highly paid, very educated set of people. So they're kind of, they're 30-something-year-old, typically undergrad or graduate educated. 2/3 of them are men. They've typically been in the firm about 5 years. This is a very elite set of employees. This is not, when we worked in it 10 years ago, we used call center people. This is completely different. These are people who are being creative, coming up with new ideas, launching products, running marketing campaigns, etc. 2 things to note is, interesting enough, prior performance doesn't predict volunteer status. So they have a 1 to 5 performance grade, 5 being the top, 1 being the bottom. You notice that volunteers are actually slightly better, but it's not statistically different. So it wasn't that all the bad people did not volunteer. They basically look the same. What you do see is far less managers volunteer. So managers that manage people were saying it's going to be harder to manage people remotely, and so they're less likely to volunteer. Other stuff I thought was kind of interesting. There's no difference in marriage, no difference in having kids, not much difference in gender. There's mostly things are relatively flat, actually. The big difference is basically, are you a manager, and related to that, do you have tenure? So
the commute time is kind of what you'd expect, although I would have thought it might be even bigger. Yeah.
On commute time.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. People that lived a long way away, non-managers wanted to work from home. Managers that lived nearby didn't. I was kind of surprised, though. There's not much difference. It's there, but it's not very big on gender. The magnitude is pretty small. In fact, men are more likely to volunteer to come in. There's nothing on children. There's nothing on being married. These are the kind of demographics people actually focus on. There really isn't that much there. It's much more on your position in the firm.
These people have long commutes, over an hour and a half. Is that round trip?
Yes. Robin, I think we asked them about round trip, didn't we?
Yeah, this is round trip. So
some people here,
like 100. Yeah.
Some people have horrible commutes, like 2-hour commutes, don't they, both ways? There are some immense commutes. There are some immense commutes in the Bay Area. There are people that commute 2 hours in both directions. But it's pretty rare. Yeah.
Right. You might expect they would be the most eager to work from home.
Yes. So then what about take up? So there are 4 groups: volunteer treated, volunteer control, non-volunteer treated, non-volunteer control. Here's basically work from home days. It was 0 before the experiment. Volunteer wave goes first. The volunteers their take-up rate's about 55%. It kind of drifts up to about 60% almost. You can see it's slightly higher around holidays. These are Fridays before holidays. So what's happening is, not surprisingly, people on the Friday before the holiday are more likely to work from home. These are Fridays, these are Wednesdays, so people are more likely to work from home on Friday, less on Wednesday. And then these are the non-volunteers. You notice they go up pretty fast. So I think James was right. A lot of these people wanted to work from home. They certainly take up the opportunity when they're offered it. They're just nervous about volunteering. So on average, take-up rate's about 50%. It's almost exactly 50%. So in response to Jasmine, this is really an evaluation of work from home, typically 1 day a week. One thing that's really striking, because it's a big management issue in relation to the US about whether people should choose their days they get to work from home, is people have a very high rate of coordination with their teammates. So on the y-axis is whether you work from home, and this is plotted against whether the rest of the team, excluding you, is with the share of them that's working from home. And you notice that if none of your team is working from home, this is obviously only for Wednesday and Fridays. If none of the rest of your team is working from home, you're much less likely to than they all are. So there's a very strong relationship. What's going on is, if no one is working from home, you tend to come in. If everyone is working from home, you tend to go in. You can worry this is due to holidays, this correlation, or due to team fixed effects or something. It isn't. So you can put in team fixed effects, date fixed effects is very robust. You look at whether your manager works from home, it's positive, but the coefficient is way smaller. So people basically want to come into the office with their co-workers. They're much less bothered about coming to the office with their manager.
Did you look at the day of the week? Because the really interesting, if one team tends to work at home on Wednesdays and another team works at home on Fridays, that would be a pretty strong evidence of coordination, even if they had the same total amount of work from home.
Yeah, we could look at that. I think, yeah, we could look at actually day of the week harmonization. We don't know whether they just randomly each week choose a day or whether they're always Wednesdays, always Fridays, actually. They're clearly harmonizing. There's some force. I mean, it's not that surprising, I guess. There's a manager.
Well, there's two things. There's harmonizing, like a complementarity, or it could be like a cultural norm, like, hey, it's okay to work from home. Other people are doing it. And those have pretty different interpretations.
That's a great point. Yes, and we should look at whether it's always the same day or whether it kind of rotates back and forwards. I think it gives us some sense. The same day, maybe.
Yeah, if a team member works home on Wednesday, does that make it more likely that you work at home on Wednesday, or are you equally likely to then work at home on Friday? If it's a cultural thing, then maybe you just say, okay, it's a norm, it's okay to do it. But if it's a coordination thing, then you might have, some teams that do Wednesdays and some teams that do Fridays.
Great. So this is very consistent with US data. So here we've surveyed 3,000 Americans and asked them, what are the top 3 benefits of working on your employer's business premises? So why do you come to work? And you notice 1 and 2 are face-to-face work and socializing. So people, I mean, it's not surprising. People come into work. Certainly I do as an academic. When I come in to either work with students or work with colleagues. My office is nicer at home. I definitely don't come in to use the office or the equipment. And so you see that, and it's not therefore surprising that people coordinate. This is a huge issue when you talk to American companies. People don't like coming to the office to sit quietly or on Zoom. They say, I might as well be at home. So what about, I'll go through 3 results and hand over to Robin to talk about performance. So firstly, employee satisfaction. Probably the best result is just quit rates. So on the left is the quit rate over 6 months for the control employees and the treatment employees. And this is significantly different. Here's the 5%, I can't remember, it's at 3% or something, but this is a significantly different result. It's about a 35% reduction. This is the single most important fact when the firm looked at it. They said it's very expensive to train people up. It takes 2-3 months worth of salary every time someone quits. So this is a massive saving in terms of turnover rate. On the right, we look at it, volunteers, non-volunteers. You can interpret this in different ways. In some ways, the gap is biggest for volunteers. It's not that surprising. These are people that really want to work from home. Somebody said, well, maybe it's the people that miss the opportunity, get pissed off and leave. I think what's going on is volunteers are people that come back to what Eric said earlier, they live further away, they have a long commute, they're probably not managers, they're more likely to leave. You let them work from home and that dramatically reduces their probability of leaving. If you don't, they end up leaving. So you can interpret this either way. Either way, in both volunteers and non-volunteers, there's a gap. And overall, it's about a 1/3 reduction, which is a very big number. You can also just survey them, ask them questions like, would you recommend this job to friends? What's your work satisfaction or life satisfaction, work-life balance, your expected attrition, the expected attrition. All of these things tend to be more positive. A positive number is a better outcome for the firm, for treatment employees, particularly when you interact that with volunteers. So here's a regression of treatment is higher on average, but volunteer treatment is much higher. So yeah, again, it's not that surprising. People that are allowed to work from home are generally happier. Interestingly, there's a lot of discussion in the US about burnout and stress and people being really upset and isolated and mental health issues. For hybrid workers, I think it suggests, at least for hybrid, if you're allowed to work from home 1 or 2 days a week, it's probably good for work-life balance. It's much less obvious full-time because it isolates you. In fact, in the 2010 RCT we did with C-Trip, people that were randomized into almost fully remote, after 6 months, half of them changed their mind and said it's very depressing. It's like very lonely. These people are only working from home 1 day a week, and certainly for them, that's positive, which I can kind of totally understand. You get 1 day a week, you don't have to change and go out, to the office. It's less stressful, there's less commute, etc. This is consistent. Here's data in another paper we have surveying from about 20 countries around the world. We've been collecting data on working from home. We ask a question about how much do you value that in terms of a percentage of pay. I won't bore you with the details, but the numbers are about 5%. So people value the ability to work from home 2-3 days a week as about the same as about 5% pay increase. So it's an important perk, and not surprisingly, if you offer that to employees, they're less likely to quit. So that's employee satisfaction. What about communications? So Trip relies on a chat thing. It's like, well, they have emails for official things that the firm sends out. They have like WeChat for private stuff. So if Eric and I are like, or Jasmine or I saying like, let's go out after work or let's go play golf or something, we might use WeChat. And then they use this internal chat thing for work stuff, but there's quick backwards and forwards communication. So if I'm saying I'd like, I don't understand line of code 207, what's going on, or when are we going to have the team meeting or whatever, I'm going to use this chat message. So this is kind of quick messaging. So you see on Wednesday and Friday, so this is not remotely surprising. So this is exactly as you'd expect. People that are working from home, the treatment people, send about 16% more messages on Wednesday, Friday. They're at home, they're not physically with anyone else. It's not surprising at all. In fact, it's what you'd expect. They're more likely to send messages. So in some ways, this is a good sense check. What's much more surprising is they're also more likely to send messages on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. So these are days they're in the office, but they come into the office and they're still sending more messages. They're also more likely to send messages on Saturday and Sunday. So this is more surprising. Here's the regression. I was going to say, the thing I think is most striking here is Tuesday. So Tuesday in some ways the most interesting because the last day these folks have worked from home is the Friday before. It's very unlikely a chat is still running over all the way from Friday to the following Tuesday. So the fact that they're still sending more messages even on Tuesday tells you they're starting more message conversations even when they're in the office. So that's one thing, they send more messages. The other thing is they communicate more with team members and people they're close to. This is called the silo effect. I think it's named after big silos where everything's kept separate. So we look at the increase in the number of messages that people that are working from home send to their team members and to people not in their team, to close friends, which are people they were messaging before the pandemic, to not close friends, people they weren't. What you see is there's a much bigger increase to team members, particularly a much bigger increase to close friends. So what seems to be going on is they're messaging more, and they're particularly messaging more to colleagues, friends, people in their team. They are messaging more, but less so to people they know less well. And there's some work from Microsoft on this, arguing it's work from home has some siloing effect. People tend to be good at building contacts to people they know, but less good at branching out and meeting new people. And there's some kind of weak support for that here. The other thing is treatment people are more likely to message treatment employees than control. So this is the increase in messages of treatment to treatment. It goes up the most. Control to control, these people in the office, it's not surprising that doesn't rise. These two are in interesting groups because control to treatment and treatment to control, one of these pair is not at home. So think of these guys, control to treatment. We know the treatment person's at home. So it shouldn't really matter whether the control person's in the office or home. If I'm in the office, Jasmine's at home, I want to talk to her, I have to message her. What's interesting is if we're both at home, treatment to treatment, the messaging goes up much more than if one of us is at home. And we have various hypotheses for why this is. Yeah, I'm happy to take suggestions. It's not obvious to us. I mean, maybe the treatment people get used to messaging, they are better at responding. So, if Sang-Woo messages me, I message him back. I know if he's a home-based employee, I know he's like to be on his computer, he's more likely to reply, therefore I message him in the first place. Robin's a control person, he's in the office, I think he's busy, he's not going to reply, don't bother messaging him. But this certainly changes communication. So they like to send more messages, both in their work from home days and the office. There's more messaging. You're more likely to message people you know well. You're more likely to message other people that are working from home. I'm not sure this is good or bad, but it's certainly something that changes the structure of the firm. And then third, I'll talk about hours. So hours on the top is VPN use. So if you're working from home, you have to use the VPN to connect into the office computer. So firstly, at the top, we look at the change in VPN use. You notice it goes up a lot on Wednesday, Friday. That's hardly surprising. They go up by 1.5 hours. When we interviewed them, they said they VPN about 3/4 of the time they're working at home. So that suggests they're working with VPN, they're increasing their work on Wednesdays, Fridays on average by something like 2 hours at home, which given they're not working from home every Wednesday, Friday is quite a large increase. Interestingly enough, they're working from home more on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. So not only are they doing more work from home on Wednesday, Friday, they appear to be doing more work after work in the evenings, on other weekdays and on the weekend. So Jasmine works from home Wednesday, Friday. She used the VPN a lot then, but she also seems to use the VPN more on other days as well. So she's doing more work in the evenings. Interestingly enough, they have a lot less office time. And you notice the drop in office time is much bigger than the increase in VPN. When you add up all the numbers together, I'm not going to bore you with the details, the amount of hours they're working is roughly constant. What you see is they're working less time on Wednesday, Friday, and putting more time after work in the evenings on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. So they're doing roughly the same number of hours over the week, but they're cutting it on work from home days.
So,
interesting. Go ahead.
Work from home on Wednesday and Friday is a complement, not a substitute for working at home on other days. It makes it more likely that they do work from home on other days.
Yeah, exactly. And it could be, I think part of it's a home office thing. Part of it, I suspect, is they just do less work. When you interview them, it's really like the go to the dentist story. So you have to go to the dentist, and it's really hard to take time off when you're in the office. If you're working at home, it's a perfect time to do it because dentists aren't often open on Saturday, Sunday, or pick your children up from school or this kind of stuff, or go play golf. If you're a big golfer, it's really cheap weekdays. So there's a lot of stories of things they told us, and I think that's part of it. And the other, Eric, the other thing is I think complementarity. Somehow, once you've got it set up, it's easier to do. Jasmine.
Yeah, and for this VPN logging thing, do you think it's more of coordination and people actually working on those days, or it's more like an impression management? Because they're like you need to like log into VPN, like you need to log into your like whatever enterprise social media they're using, like to let your boss see, oh, you are available on this specific technology. Yeah, so I'm just wondering like how the system work here, or like what is your guess like for this data here? Yeah.
Great. So 2 thoughts. One is that certainly could be true on Wednesday, Friday. They for sure may worry that they're supposed to be there on Wednesday, Friday. I think if you look at when this is happening on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, it tends to be in the evening. And certainly I don't think bosses are expecting them to be working in the evening. And on the weekends, I don't think there's any expectation. It's also the case, I'll show in a minute, their performance is probably slightly better. So you may be true. It may be some impression management. I can't disprove that, but they're not performing worse. So it may be their impression management, but also actually performing well. It's a good question. I don't know, actually. I know that people, when you talk to people that work from home, they say they feel like they have to reply to emails really fast to make sure that their bosses don't think they're falling asleep. Or I know it's funny when I did the thing in C-Trip in 2010, it was such a fantastic cultural difference between China and the US. So in the US, when you talk to people about work from home, they're worried that their employees are like watching television or asleep or like doing something else. watching Jerry Springer. I remember somebody said, "Oh, I'm really worried my employees are like watching game shows." Whereas in China, they were really worried their employees were either playing video games or running their own business. They like, C-Trip was like, they're terrified their employees have a second business going on. It was like such a different use of time. But either way, yeah, I think there's a concern that employees at home are doing something that isn't work. So that may also be there. I mean, it's evening. Much of this stuff is evenings and weekends, but I think on Wednesday, Friday, there's some concern over it. I mentioned it briefly. You see more of these messages. Here's the message data. Here's the share of messages sent outside regular hours. They're basically working more in the evenings on the weekend. So this is consistent with when you ask people, what are the 3 big benefits of working from home? This is US data. Number 1 is no commute. That's hardly surprising. The big thing is, this hour-plus commute is very painful. In fact, in these surveys going back for decades, when you ask people the worst part of their day, they always say the commute. It's the most unpleasant part of most people's day. I remember Richard Layard at LSE telling me this like in 20 years ago. Number 2 is what this is getting up. It's this flexible work schedule. So folks that work from home basically have more flexibility. They get to do what they want to some extent on Wednesday, Friday, and we see they're doing that. So I'm going to stop at this point, and then I will hand over to Robin to give you a change of voice. And yeah, why don't you go ahead? Thanks, Robin.
Hi, thanks, Nick. So I'm going to share my screen here. Share screen. Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. So probably this is another very important page in the slides. So the firm has.
Oh, Robin, you're on presentation view. I think there's some way to change it. A display settings, is it? Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah. Oh wait, no, that was my screen.
I actually don't know.
If you go back to that, I've seen this before many times in Zoom, but I think if you go to this, you go back to it, I think the display settings button does it.
Like the display, but not displaying this part, right?
If you screen share again, just go back to where you were. Thanks. If you just go back to screen share.
Okay. I think I know what happened. Because I have 2 monitors here, it's complicated things. Is there a full slide? Yeah. I don't know. Sorry for that. Maybe I can do it.
We can use that. It's fine. But why do you just go back to what you were doing, Robin? I think there's a fix to it that's pretty fast. If you just go back to where you were. Thanks.
Display settings. Well,
I think you have to do it while you're presenting.
Okay. Does this
so if
work?
you screen share again.
Oh no! What happened? I don't know what happened to my screen. So I have to stop sharing first, or?
Tell you what, Robin, do you want me to share and you talk?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Why don't we just do that? And you can just say next slide. Okay.
Sorry for that. Yeah, so probably this is very important. So to our left is there a half-year review. So this half-year covers like last July to this January. So basically it overlaps with the experimental 6 months. So the managers of the employees will sit down with other team leaders or project leaders to discuss the contributions of the employees during this half year. And also for some teams, they have peer review parts. So this is very rigorous because it will determine your performance and pay. So you'll get a letter grade from A to D. So A is the best. So we can say most employees get B maybe, and if you get B plus and A, you're kind of above average, and we don't see any significant difference between the control group and the treatment group employees. And to our right is their promotion decisions made this January. So this to the left in this plot is upgrade. Upgrade means like a small, for example, small bonus increase or salary increase, and the promotion is like you really promote to 1 level up. So again, for this one, we don't have any significant difference the coefficients is insignificantly positive for the treatment group. Next slide, please, Nick. And here we also see no evidence of performance spillovers within teams. So we rank the individual performance grade or promotions on their treatment status, and also the team treatment share, and also how many team members in your team are in the treatment group. And overall, we don't find any significant difference here. Meanwhile, we don't find any significant like spillover effects from your teammates, like who may or may not work at home. Next slide, please.
Jasmine, this is the response I gave you earlier about it's not a perfect response to your question. It's kind of the best we can do. It doesn't look like the control people are doing worse. It looks like the treatment people are doing better. But yeah, so this is.
Yeah. And also like for the team member here, is there any case that a member, like an employee may belong to several teams, not like a multi-team system, or it's like one by one like match, like one employee only belong to like one team?
Yeah, here only one employee only belongs to one team here in this sense. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they may participate in different projects, but we're not doing the like project by project analysis here. Yeah.
I have a quick clarifying question. So what is the average size of team here?
About six. With so the average team size is 6, and the standard deviation is like almost 3. Yeah.
Okay. It's quite small.
Yeah.
And also for this effect, there's no difference between enthusiastic control and enthusiastic.
Yeah, we may do that. I forgot that, but yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, we may do that somewhere else, but I forgot the answer. Yeah.
Okay. Partly to follow up the response to Eric earlier, we couldn't really get anything significant with performance or promotion stuff. We have all these interactions. We kind of, as Eric said, I thought there'd be some groups this would be great, and for others it wouldn't. And I think it's now in the backup slides, but much like here, it kind of was mostly slightly.
You'd ideally like to see it in the performance, but you might pick it up on the other dimensions, like whether they were happy or unhappy. Like if you're on a team and you really need to talk to this guy and they're never around, maybe that's a negative. So they might pick it up, and maybe you end up getting the work done anyways. So it might show up elsewhere. But it's as you had an earlier slide. Clearly, there's some types of work that have to be at in the office, and some that can be remote. So you're already focusing on a relatively homogeneous group.
Exactly.
Yeah, thanks. And so this is when we look at the line of code they submit, and so the first two columns their code submit from Monday to Friday, and we also look at separately on Wednesday and Friday all the other 3 days. And we find that treatment group employees write about 8% more lines of code than the control group employees. Basically, this is driven by the office days, when there are days in the office. Yeah, I admit this is not a very good, like maybe not the perfect measure. Yeah. Okay. Next slide, please. And where we do find the performance increase is their belief on their productivity. So back to last August, so we asked this question in the baseline survey: how do you think the work from home scheme will impact your productivity compared to working in the office? And at the baseline, the mean productivity impact is about 0.06%. And at the end of the experiment, that is January this year, this number increased to almost 2%. And both the level and the change are significant. But the significant improve is also for the control group. So there's no difference between treatment and control group. Here means that you don't need to participate, experiencing the work from home yourself to update your beliefs. Maybe that's enough for you to observe what happens with your colleagues. In some ways, the control group employees also like participate or experience work from home. because their colleagues do. Next slide, please.
Sorry, can you go back? Can you go back one slide?
Yeah.
One more slide. Yeah, sorry. So in this, so you already have the date fixed effect. So
Yeah.
okay, so during their working time, during their home working time, they also write more codes. Is that
Yeah.
how to read?
Yeah. So if you like, yeah.
So they work less time, but their productivity.
Well, so there's multiple things going on. You're right. They do slightly less hours on their home days. They probably though rotate around. If I were them, I'd have all my meetings in my office days and save code writing for home days to the extent it's possible. So I suspect the activity is skewed a bit more towards code writing on days at home. And Monday, Tuesday, Thursday could be also the fact they work a bit more after work in the evenings. We've just seen that. So the split, it's not, we put this up partly because it's not all Wednesday, Friday, not all Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. You notice they're both up. It's hard to know what exactly is driving it, but there's not some kind of extreme outlier. They're certainly working a bit longer days. I suspect a simple explanation is they're working a bit more Monday, Tuesday, Thursday in the evenings when they get home. And that's what's bumping that up. And Wednesday, Friday, maybe it's quiet. Certainly in the original study, the folks were about 13% more productive working from home. When you interviewed the people in the call centers, about 4% they were more productive per minute because they said it's quiet. And then the other 9%, they said they just work more minutes. When you looked at the data, they didn't spend as long going to the toilet. They were quicker to eat lunch. They arrived on time. They didn't take long breaks. So in the office, you spend a lot of time not actually at your desk. You're like wandering around, talking to people, getting coffee, grabbing lunch, going to the toilet. That just isn't as frequent at home. So that could kind of explain Wednesday and Friday. So even though they're formally working for less hours, they're so much more efficient per hour that they actually end up getting more done.
Okay, that's very interesting because I think you can think of two types of the productivity increase. One type is like you can allocate more efficiently, but also for each day you actually productivity can increase. So you're saying that maybe both ways are working here.
Yeah, I mean it's a good in the original stuff. If you work more minutes in your shift, is that productivity? As an economist, you kind of think of productivity per second work, but we never measure seconds. We measure effectively weeks. And so if Eric and I, nobody knows how many hours any of us work, to be honest. So we're just down as I don't know what the CPS or the national accounts call us or company data or anything. When we do regressions and use census data, we assume people work 40-hour weeks. So that would show up as if you're actually just more efficient and work more minutes and spend less time going to the toilet. So you'd show up as being more productive. And so that's a big chunk of it. That was 2/3 of it in the original study. And only 1/3 is you're more efficient per minute work.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll take you through. Here we go.
Yeah. So our findings here is consistent with data showing. So this is data collected, I guess, by Nick again. So our results is consistent with evidence there that work from home turned out to be better than expected for most employees who are forced to work from home during the pandemic. Yeah. So after this experiment and just before the Chinese New Year this year, so we do some analysis during the holiday and I think mid February the company look at our preliminary analysis and they think this turned to be very good, very nice results. So they announced that they'll roll out this policy to the whole company by the beginning of March. And luckily or unluckily, we have the Shanghai lockdown. So we just look at what happens during the lockdown, and we'll continue to collect the data for another 6 months for the whole company to do like a longer run analysis. Yeah, next slide, please. So yeah, so this is especially at that time is very rare in China, and so this has a lot of media coverage. Yeah, we may want to update this news coverage slides because we have some like international coverage after the posting right last month.
Yeah.
And yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so we think the two participating experiments, the airfare and the IT departments are representative for the whole company. So that's why we picked them. and to track the longer run change and the whole company when the policy roll out, the whole company what's the general equilibrium effects. We take the business trip division and marketing department. Yeah, and next slide. Maybe to summarize, we find employees appear to enjoy work from home, and the concerns of their managers are addressed a lot, and the attrition is reduced by 30%. And this work from home scheme alters communication, more messages to friends and their close contacts, teammates, and employees appear to adopt flexi time. They work less on the work from home days, but more on the other days and the weekend and evenings. And we find the evidence of mild positive impact on performance. And this suggests this work from home is positive for the whole firm, and the XNT probably underappreciated. Yeah, thanks.
Great, thank you, Robin. I'll stop. I want to stay punctual, so I'll stop sharing at this point.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say thank you very much for hopefully it's a bit weird doing this on Zoom. Some of you I see in person, but some I won't. But yeah, thanks for paying attention and asking great questions.
I wonder, I wonder, Professor Bloom, if you can take maybe one or two questions from the audience.
Sure.
Yeah. Are there any questions or comments? Yeah, seems like a no.
Great, we answered everything. I get, funnily enough, after the last one, I got loads of emails and questions from hedge funds. Should I invest in C-Trip stock? And I was like, I'm not going to talk about that. You've got to be joking. I mean, that's like completely illegal. That'd be like insider trading. But I get so many contacts of, I don't know, Eric, if you had that when you work with firms, people try their luck.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like insane. I mean, it's like it would be illegal for me to tell them. I was like, there's no way I can tell you anything about it. You should go talk to the company's public relations. It's nothing to do anyway. So yeah, I'm happy to take any questions, but
yeah, seems like you already covered all the questions in the middle of the presentation. And thanks to the speakers for wonderful talk.
Hello. Hi.
Oh yeah.
Hi, Nick, and very interesting study. And this is Tian Shu from USC. I'm also a senior advisor in Alibaba, and I'm very interested in your high-level thoughts and about the difference in the work from remote trend in China and in US. It seems in China this trend is not as strong and as fast as the Silicon Valley, where I've been working for a long time. And I just want to learn your high-level thoughts on the critical factors that would kind of explain this difference. This is very general question, but it kind of maybe also related to our study today. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. I mean, my broad take is it's a good decision by Trip.com. Look, from their perspective, they saw kind of, three main results. So people are much happier. So quit rates are down. That clearly makes them more money because it's expensive to have to hire and rehire people. And you can get away with paying people less money. If they're happy with work from home, you basically can cut their salary a lot. Not a lot, a bit. And then secondly, they're slightly more productive. You can kind of argue that's pretty small. It's not a big thing, but it's there. Thirdly, in the long run, they'll probably save a bit of space. That's not that easy. But they may start to say, look, some groups you're going to be Monday, Tuesday, other groups Wednesday, Thursday, etc. And there's no downside. Like James's view is like, where is the bad side? There isn't a bad side. So it's like a very easy decision to make. My guess is it's the same thing that held back American and European and just about every other firm up until 2020. That they're just, a lot of firms are conservative or don't really realize that it can work well. In some sense, it's not unreasonable because the technology to support this is pretty new. So Dropbox only came out in 2009 and the cloud was, 10, 11 and Zoom. I mean, even Zoom, I think Zoom was founded. These stuff, if you go back to 2015, this would have been harder. 2010 is impossible. So in the last 5 years, we've had technology to make this is, I think, well-managed Chinese firms would do this. They may not be as gung-ho as American companies. To give you a sense of how extreme it is in Silicon Valley, when you talk to tech firms, it's not between hybrid and in person is between hybrid and fully remote. And you notice Apple, interestingly, Apple's a great example, because when I had dinner with James in London in July 2021 and said, copy Apple, Tim Cook had just announced not a couple of months ago, this Wednesday, Friday work from home. That's become so mean in America that they got in trouble and have basically said, fine, we're going to allow you to work from home more than 2 days a week. So in tech, the norm is more like 3. And if you're offering less than 3, you're seen as mean. Outside of tech and the rest of professional services and business services, more like 2. I would have thought for Alibaba, it's be an easy strategic decision to make a lot of money, frankly, letting people to work from home 1 day a week. I'd have just done it as Friday. Because you want people working from home on the same day. So the simplest thing is saying you can work from home on Fridays as long as your performance is good. If it's bad, we'll haul you back into the office and use it as a recruiting tool. There doesn't seem much downside. I mean, what are people going to do? They're going to stop having big meetings on Fridays. They're going to push aside all their reading, writing, coding to Friday, and that'd be a quiet, deep work day. Seems all good. So I think Chinese firms would do it. I mean, the more competition and more market forces, and the more stressed the company is, the more they'll be forced to do it. Right now, a lot of the Chinese tech firms are pretty profitable, so you can afford not to do something like that and still survive. But James, I just think, is a very good forward-thinking manager. That's the reason he did it.
Yeah. No, thanks. That's very insightful. And also another observation seems to be between on this US-China difference seems to be the adoption of SaaS in general. The hybrid work may accelerate the adoption of software as a service, and China seems lag behind Silicon Valley on that. But if this hybrid work is kind of continues to roll out in China, there might also be a kind of this might also be driving the innovation adoption and diffusion of the SaaS. The SaaS trend in China in general, I feel, is 10 years behind Silicon Valley. And
there are other differences. So there are 2 other factors. So China has as much connectivity as the US. There's a lot of countries I've spoken to firms like Indonesia. They just don't have connectivity. That's not a problem for China. On the one hand, Chinese living accommodation is smaller and more cramped. So Chinese tend to live in smaller apartments, which is less suitable for work from home. On the other hand, their commute, you come back to the point Eric made, their commutes are longer and they're more unpleasant. And they're not just longer. Americans' commutes tend to be in their own car or they're on public transport. They're not, crushed. Whereas in China, much like London, actually, London was unpleasant. So it's hard to know which dominates, actually. I would have thought in big Chinese cities, this is, it's ripe for hybrid. Fully remote is totally different. Fully remote is a very different thing. And that most companies outside tech are not doing. In fact, if I asked you to name, essentially 5 fully remote companies, you'd name only tech firms. Because no one can think of any others, because there really aren't any other big fully remote firms that aren't tech. So I would, that's a different, I'm sure Eric's done this. I've discussed with a lot of CEOs and managers of tech firms about this, and there's ups and downsides.
No, it's remarkable how much they're sticking with it for quite a, many of them seemingly indefinitely. They seem happy to do that. And then, you looked at hybrid, but going fully remote adds a whole nother dimension of people being very distant. They don't have to be in the geographic neighborhood.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Thank you, Link. Yeah, very.
We can hire. To be honest, I had a fascinating. The best person I spoke to about this was Adam D'Angelo, who is the founder of Quora, and I was tweeting something, and he responded on Sunday evening, and then just suddenly got on Zoom, and I spoke to him for almost an hour, and he synthesized it all. He said, "Look, the big benefits of fully remote is you can get rid of your office. There's about 25% of wage bill, and you can hire internationally. In America, because they're become very tight in immigration, we can't basically bring Asian coders to the Bay Area, so let's take the jobs to them. So those are the 2 upsides. And he said the downsides is mentoring, kind of creativity and culture. And that those are all major things. So it's kind of hard to evaluate. And he said, look, I'm not certain. My guess is it's probably best for us, and they've gone fully remote. Some other firms have done the same. Others like Microsoft, Google, Apple are doing hybrid. To be honest, if it were my firm, I'd probably be conservative and stick with hybrid and see where things go. 10 years time, it may be totally different. 10 years time, we have amazing virtual reality like Star Wars, human 3D things. And at that point, we're like fully remote. And by the way, just to be clear, fully remote doesn't mean you never meet your coworkers. It tends to mean you meet them once every 2 months in a 1-week retreat. So it's not like no interaction. It's just it's not on a weekly basis.
I see. Thank you, Nick.
And so I should stop. We run over time. I think we can all talk forever about work from home. It's like I'm at home. My kids always say they can hear me shouting about it through the door because people tend to talk too loudly on laptops. But, so.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much for a wonderful talk. Yeah.
Great. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, Robin.
Thank you.